Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I thought for sure the podcast before this one was going to be the last, but a fan suggested we discuss a societal issue relating to feminism, which in and itself is surprising. There are people who listen to these podcasts. So, as you just heard today, we will be discussing issues correlating with feminism. Now, hopefully, by the end of the segment, all of you listening from home or work won't end up falling asleep, because although some think that history may be a snooze, it is actually quite interesting. I mean, it is the reason of how and why we are here now. So, yeah, before we begin with a little preview of the segment, I actually have a question for all of you. Now, I don't really expect an answer because, this is a podcast, so can't actually hear you. Well, maybe if we get callers on the podcast, maybe for the next one. What do you think? Anyway, back on topic. My question to you is, how do you perceive feminism and women's rights? Do you think that society is, as now, fair and just to the treatment towards women? It isn't as good as you think. No. In fact, very little change has happened within the last decade, which isn't good for the women wanting this change. Now, I'm no expert on feminism, but I will be using some actual professionals' work to inform you more on this topic. In fact, 80% of you are probably telling me to hurry up and get to the segment. And to that, I have to say that I am paid by the hour, so calm down. That's a joke. I don't get paid. Enough of my personal life, and let's get to our discussion. So, my opinion of female treatment in society differs from many others, but one thing that I do notice that seems unjust is gender pay gaps. Yes, if you didn't know they exist, now you do. And according to studies like AAUW in their article, quote, "The simple truth about the gender pay gap," end quote, they talk about women and their pay in the US, which in their words, quote, "Women working full-time in the US are paid 82 cents to every dollar earned by men." But it doesn't stop there, period. The consequences of this gap affect women throughout their lives, end quote. Now they go on to talk about how women who actually now outpace men with higher education, but obtain higher student debt than anyone, are working harder to pay off their debt than men. In fact, another source I used for this podcast, by the name of McKinsey Global Institute, and their article, quote, 10 Things to Know About Gender Equality, quote, written by Michaela Krishnan and Anu Madgavkar, Quivlin, Edlin Grad, Laurian Yi, Vivian Hunt, Olivia White, and Depa Mahayan. Sorry for the incorrect pronunciations. Anyways, they state that, quote, between 2000 and 2018, women accounting for two-thirds of 45 million jobs created in 22 OECD countries, but many of these jobs were part-time or independent work that were less secure and offered lower pay and fewer benefits. In this period, female part-time employment increased by 2.3 percentage points versus a 0.7 percentage point increase in full-time employment for women, end quote. Which that in itself is pretty bad. So how do we fix/improve gender equality and stereotyping? Well, in my opinion, some gender discrimination laws should improve the state of gender equality, but other sources like Plan International, in their article, quote, Challenging Gender Discrimination, a how-to guide, quote, states that ways we can resolve these issues are ways identifying these issues like, quote, sexual harassment, catcalling, quote, gender stereotyping at school and work, end quote, and, quote, objectification, end quote, which they also explain why these are problems. For example, they say, quote, harassment and catcalling on the street are prime examples of how women's rights to walk freely among their environment is restricted, end quote. They also go to say, quote, objectification is when a person is treated as a commodity or an object without regard to their personality or dignity. It commonly happens in the media where women are photoshopped and airbrushed, leading to much more emphasis and value. This affects a girl's body image, their self esteem, and ultimately the value they put on themselves. End quote. We discussed a lot of this issue, but there's more, and we will continue after a quick break. So roll the ads. Oh, wait, we don't get sponsors. Play the music. Are we back on? Okay. Alright. Welcome back from our break. So, where we left off, we were discussing ways to improve gender equality and the effect these issues cause. Now we will talk about the benefits of gender equality so we can motivate people to work harder for these rights, which everyone should have. Some benefits that gender equality would give are, as said by Vic Government or vic.gov.au, which in their article, the benefits of gender equality. Some benefits they say are, quote, gender equality prevents violence against women and girls, end quote. Quote, gender equality makes our communities safer and healthier, end quote. And, quote, gender equality is a human right, end quote. Now, I agree that improving gender equality would make these benefits arise, and what got me thinking this are there explanations on why these benefits would occur. With a ridding of gender equality, quote, gender equality is a root cause of violence against women, end quote. And for safer communities, quote, they say, unequal societies are less cohesive. They have higher rates of antisocial behavior and violence. Countries with greater gender equality are more connected, end quote. In the end, gender inequality is a big problem that needs to be fixed. Not only gender discrimination, but also gender pay gaps. So, a recap of this podcast, we talked about gender pay gaps and their effect on women's lives, gender inequality and stereotypes, and some ways to improve these issues. With that, the podcast is now over. Thank you for listening, and I wish you well.